Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books, and today we are talking about Return to Edan, which could be my book of the year. Let's talk about it. This is going to be a non-spoiler review for Return to Edan. However, I am going to have to pretty heavily spoil the end of Prophet of Edan. So if you have not read the first two books in the Edan Trilogy, unfortunately, there is literally no way to talk about this book without talking about the first two, unless I'm so vague that there's no point in having this discussion. So, what happens at the end of Prophet of Edan? So, the entire story for the first two books in the Edan Trilogy is that the supreme, the religious leader, I actually can't remember what his name now is. Does it say on the back of the book? Damn. Okay, so the big cheese of the Edan religion, the Edan Church, is called Bledla, and he supreme priest. That's what it is. So he's the supreme priest of Edan, and he has the most power in the gift, which is what the magic is called, which is, you know, and the magic is basically that you are able to kind of dip into a world called the realm of origins, and when you're in there, you're able to sing specific songs, and those songs can then create magical effects in the world. So those songs are used in the books to do things like cast wizard fire to shoot lightning from your hands. They're used to mind control people and animals. Lots of really interesting stuff. Healing as well is done using the gift. And Bledla has mastered the Song of Origin for dragons, which no one else has been able to do. No one's had the power to do. And not only has he mastered the Song of Origin for dragons, but he's also mastered it to the point that he can control like 10 dragons, and those 10 dragons attack the world, and those dragons are almost analogous to nuclear warfare, I would say. And it's like, what if one country in the world had nukes and no one else did? And he is using those weapons, he's using those dragons to attack other nations and to conquer the world. And the goal of Bledla is to spread the way of Edan across the entire world. And when Edan, when basically everyone is under the thumb of Edan, then Bledla believes that he can summon Edan back to Jormunland, which is the world, and to make it the world of Edan again, basically. And what happens at the end of Prophet of Edan is that Dayraven, who is the lead in the first two books, the protagonist, he has incredible strength in the gift, which he was given by being attacked by an elf, and the elf kind of embedded a shard of itself in his mind, in his soul, and enabled him to use the gift in the way that the elves do, which is much like, you know, incredibly more powerful. And he is at he's at or possibly beyond the level of the Supreme Priest of Bledla. And Dayraven, at the end of book 2, defeats the dragons, defeats Bledla, kills him, and in the process of that, he is changed. He forgets who he is, he's swept away down a river, and wakes up basically with no knowledge of who he is or where he is or anything. He's basically a JRPG protagonist, completely amnesiac. But he knows he has this incredible power in him, and the other factor that he has to deal with is that the elf shard, the mysterious power, is also basically what's the trying term? The elf shard believes that the way to bring peace to the world is to kill every single living thing, and it can do it. It's powerful enough to just switch off every single human every single living thing in the world. And that's what it wants to do. He's in this constant battle through the book with the Elf Shard, where the Elf Shard is desperate to murder and rage and destroy, and Dayraven is, or the Prophet, as he begins to be known, the Prophet of Edan, is desperately trying to stop it. However, we have a lot going on in this book, and one of the most interesting things about this book is that the end of Prophet of Edan feels like the end of a traditional trilogy. So if you would read a classic fantasy trilogy, that's where it ends. It ends with the hero defeats the villain and then, you know, slopes off into obscurity to live out the rest of his days, and not be bothered. But the book opens up with a world that is very much changed. We have a Torlond empire, which is ruled by a king called Erkenwald, who murders his wife very brutally in a previous book, and he's then kind of slowly going mad. He's kind of delving is the wrong term. He's descending into alcoholism because he's unable to deal with the guilt. He doesn't have his strongest soldier. He doesn't have Bledler anymore to help him overthrow and overtake the world, but he's still pushing forward with it, despite being very, very drunk all the time, unable to really understand what's going on, and people around him are beginning to notice. The world is still conquered by the Torlonders, but the Torlonders have lost a lot of their teeth. So countries are rebelling. And we land back in Jormunland, where the world is in a very different and dark place. So there's a plague sweeping across the country. There is a group of kind of Viking-esque, like not savages, but like born warriors who have been taught battle tactics by one of their number who has spent time in the Torlond kingdom, and they have united where previously these Ilarche, who were called savages by the rest of the continent, basically used to just go to war amongst themselves in their own country and left everyone alone. And then what happened was this guy Munzil brings everyone together and forms them into a formidable fighting force, into an army, and it starts to sweep across Torlond. And then we have Sequara, who is the Queen of Azdralad, which is an island, a tiny little beautiful island nation that was raised in fire and destroyed by Torlond. And her people are basically hiding out in the woods. And she is going to go back there to free the island, but she's also in love with Dayraven and is desperate to find him. And she's kind of torn between her love for him and her duty to her kingdom. And the Queen of Azdralad also does not marry, does not have children. So there is a big kind of conflict for her there, in that what she wants is to be with Dayraven, to have his children, to, you know, she wants everything that she wants, and she wants to be the queen because she feels it's her duty to be the queen. But she is worried that her wants and her duty do not mesh. And she's also full of rage at the Torlonders for their destruction of her home, for killing of her friends and her family. We then have Norn and Orvandil and Galdor and Abon, who are the kind of, originally in the first two books, they're kind of the supporting cast for Dayraven, but they end up as more the main cast in this book, because they are hunting him down. They're kind of crossing the country, following these myths and rumours of the Prophet of Edan. And then we also have a couple more characters. So we have Seren, who is a young girl who comes into a tragedy, and is kind of rescued by some kindly soldiers, and those soldiers then through them and the soldiers through her end up coming into contact with Dayraven as the prophet, and he begins to build his legend kind of around that area of the world. There's just so much going on, so much really interesting stuff. Philip Chase is spending a lot of time in this book talking about messianic figures. Dayraven as kind of the messiah of the Edan religion is just an absolutely fascinating concept that I was really interested in, and I had a lot of time for the analysis and the kind of ideas in this book. So I've talked a lot in the past about how I feel books are kind of on a scale from like Dewey to Thinky, and Dewey books are all about plot and progression, whereas Thinky books are more about ideas and characters and don't really have strong plots or don't progress on those plots. So something like Orbital by Samantha Harvey is very, very far on the Thinky scale, and then you've got someone maybe like Sanderson is very, very far on the Dewey scale, where almost all of his stories are primarily focused on moving the plot forward, and the characters are also there. Philip Chase has managed to really thread the needle here in that chapters give you a lot of plot, they give you a lot of progression, but the ideas are really at the forefront here, and the characters are at the forefront. We get to see the regret from characters who have done horrible things. We get to see Dayraven struggling against the elf, against what he feels he should do, against what he wants to do, against what he knows he is going to do. Really, really fascinating stuff. And I mean, this doesn't even cover the one of the other characters that has been kind of ancillary but interesting in the previous two books, Joraman, who was previously a high priest and is now Bledler's gone, the new supreme priest. And he is just having an absolutely fascinating story, where he's kind of trying to move beyond his past, and a horrible tragedy that happened to him in his youth is kind of shoving him, tunneling him towards this destination, and he's kind of willing to go by any means to get to that destination. I can't believe that Seren as a character is only introduced in this book. She's on the cover because she is fascinating. She's one of the most interesting characters in the entire trilogy. Loved reading her chapters. I loved her relationships with the other characters. Really, really strong characterization from Philip there. If I was going to criticize this book, I would possibly say that there are some POVs that I feel I would have wanted a bit more from. However, this is the longest book in the series. It's like, how many pages is it, in fact? Let's have a look. It is 655, maybe even more. It's over 650 pages, right? And I feel like if this book had gone on much longer, you might have felt that it dragged. It never really does. This book is probably the best length. However, there are a couple of characters like Captain Ludican and Joraman who I kind of would have liked to have spent a little bit more time with. My other negative, I would say, is that sometimes the chapters are a bit long. It took me a while to read this book. It took me almost a month, actually, from starting it to finishing it. I was reading other stuff at the time, but it took me almost a month. And one of the big things, I think, is that when I read a long chapter in a book, I often am like, I've been reading so long, I'm going to put the book down. Whereas if I've got lots of short chapters, I will actually often read for a longer amount of time. And so what I would often do with this book is read a chapter, then like put it down, go make a coffee, have a think about it, kind of roll some of the ideas that Philip poses in this book in my head, and then come back to it. And sometimes I would read another chapter. I actually read the last 20% in a single evening because I was just loving it so much. Yeah, I think the chapters sometimes are a little long. If you're like me and you don't like long chapters, I feel like by the time you get to this book, obviously you've read 2 other books by Philip, I feel like he's earned my trust enough that I'm willing to. Sometimes, so if I read a book, right, and in the first couple of chapters, they're 45 minutes long, I'm often like, oh my God, what a slog. But I don't feel that when I'm invested. And because obviously I am invested in this book, I felt the length of those chapters a little less. However, there were still many occasions where I would read one and go, well, I don't have time to finish another chapter, so I'm not going to read any more. And that was why I ended up reading it quite slowly, I think. I'm giving you a chunk of negatives in a row because, like I said earlier, I think this is the best book I've read this year. I think that the thing that I like about it is that it is interesting and it's experimental. It isn't just a black and white, ooh, the villains are bad, all the goodies are good, the dragon's dead, the world is saved. It is a really, really interesting look at religion, a really interesting look in depth at these characters. And I think one of the most interesting things for me is that this is almost like the epilogue to the first 2 books. But in some cases, it kind of almost feels like the first 2 books were the prologue for this story. And I'd be really interested to talk to Philip about the way that he wrote these books and whether he had initially thought, oh, I'm going to write, a trilogy that will be Way of Edan, Prophet of Edan, something else of Edan, and then maybe I'll write an epilogue book or another series. And I think that this is a really smart way to do it because you get those first 2 books, which are kind of one thing. They're kind of this modern interpretation of the classic fantasy storytelling. And then you get this final book, which is just another beast entirely. It's so experimental and interesting. And I remember reading the prologue and just being back in the world. I got goosebumps reading the prologue, and I felt like it was one of the best prologues I've read in forever, maybe ever. One thing I would say as well, there's one thing I probably should bring up here, a little bit of disclosure, is that Philip and I are like internet buds. So I've been on his channel. He frequently, he and I chat every now and then in comments and via email. And I am going on his channel again later this month. However, I think that you've also seen that I have done some previous videos on other friends of the channel's books, and I have not been as complimentary. I won't specifically call those out, but I think that you can trust that I would be honest with what I say, and that I would tell you if I didn't think a book was up to snuff, and I would not blow smoke up the ass of a friend of mine. That's just not the kind of person that I want to be when I come to reviewing my books. And I will tell you guys right now that I think that currently this is the book that has stuck with me the most this year. I finished reading it last week and I've honestly been thinking about it loads. I genuinely, a couple of days ago, was like, I just want to read that section again. So I found it on my Kindle by using like the search function and just read a couple of chapters again because I just wanted to see how I felt about them having read the ending. And I've never, literally, I've never done that. So if that tells you how I feel about this book, then I well, if you don't know how I feel about this book by now, that's how I feel. I honestly think that there's only one book that I'm gonna read left this year that could trump it for Book of the Year, which is Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne. That is also a conclusion. I do really love strong endings, and this is a fantastic ending. I love the characters in Fury of the Gods. I love the characters here. It's going to be a real close run thing. And I have also been looking forward to Fury of the Gods for a couple of years. So yeah, it will be a close run thing, absolutely. And I'm very excited to read Fury of the Gods. Hopefully I do get to read it this year. I had planned it in, but then I spent a month reading Return to Edan. I was reading other stuff, but I don't know when I will actually get to Fury of the Gods because I need to catch up on Wheel of Time. Is this better than every book I've read in the Wheel of Time? Honestly, the best Wheel of Time books for me have been 3, 4, and 6. And I will say that maybe this is recency bias on Return to Edan, but I do feel like, and also it being an ending and me being kind of in the middle of the Wheel of Time, it's very much two very different things that are hard to compare. But for me, currently, I think this is the front runner for Book of the Year. Should you read this series? Hopefully, if you're watching this video, you've already read it. I don't think I have spoiled anything in this book that is not on the back blurb. I might have given a few little nods to things that happen, but hopefully I have not ruined your enjoyment of the book when you go to read it, because like I said, it is a genuine marvel. I'm hoping to do an interview with Philip eventually about the series, and I genuinely have so many questions about the writing process for this book specifically, about how he chose to write this story, when he kind of splintered off from the more traditional story he tells in the first 2 books. And those books are good, but this book is amazing. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've liked this video as much as I liked reading Return to Edan, you should give this video a like. If you have also read Return to Edan and you'd like to talk to me about it, then please do so in the comments down below. And of course, if you would like to join our community, to read along with me, to see when my videos go up, then you should subscribe to the channel. And if you want to, click the bell icon and you'll be notified every day when I upload those videos, which currently I upload Monday to Friday at 5 PM. Mondays is always going to be a book review, so if you like watching reviews, then stick to the channel every Monday, 5 PM UK time, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.